Welcome everyone to ARCHICAD User Monthly Training Webinar for July 2018. This is Bobrow speaking to you from San Rafael, California, where it is a beautiful summer day, pretty mild. Let me know that you can hear me and that you can see my screen, which right now is just showing the names of a few architects who have volunteered to share their projects and beginnings of my list of best practices principles that I'll be using as part of the audit or review and checkup of these projects. So let me know that you can hear me and see me and where you're calling in from as well. Okay, I see Dean, Richard, yeah, two of our presenters. Okay, excellent. And Mechiel or Michael, who is also one of our presenters. And I wonder if Gerd is on. Gerd is our fourth one who's going to be on. So yeah, I'm seeing definitely a bunch of you, Tony, and just type in where you're calling in from. Dwight from Brantford, Ontario. Tony's from Atlanta. Steve from Colorado. Don from Lincoln, Nebraska, where it's 94 degrees. Dave from Germany, excellent. Oh, this going on and on. We have, how many people do we have right now? Something like 60 people from around the world, and usually we get close to 200 on these monthly sessions. So let me just set the expectations here, what we're going to be doing. Up to this point, ARCHICAD user webinars have been featuring one particular guest expert, an ARCHICAD user who, I've gotten to know in various ways or various times. Many of them have studied with me in terms of my training or worked to collaborate with me in terms of creating training courses or been guest presenters at the ARCHICAD Masters of ARCHICAD Summit. So people that I know pretty well, or at least am fairly familiar with. Now, this time I decided let's just open it up. Let's get a chance to look at projects from people around the world that would be interesting, people that I don't know. My main criteria is how can I help take, let's say for each of you who are participating, help you take your project further. How can I educate, make this a process that is enjoyable and a learning experience for everyone. I think it's rather a grand experiment because I've never done it this way before. Some of you know that I have online training courses, and one part of that is the ARCHICAD coaching program. So I'm very used to taking questions from architects and designers around the world, opening up projects and sort of looking at what's going on and answering questions like, how do you create a custom door like this? Or how do you get the roofs to clean up? Or, the section just doesn't look right. What do I need to do? Those sort of things. So I'm very used to looking and trying to solve problems. And along the way, I'm always trying to say, you know what, your setting here just needs to be adjusted. Or, this is a little unclear. Your whole view map just is hard to work with. So in today's session, I'm going to be focusing on some best practices principles. Let me see, I've got two screens. Oops, I didn't want to move that over. Okay, let me just grab this out of the way. So we're going to have Dean Johnston from Hawaii, Gerd Bolt from South Africa. I haven't seen whether Gerd is on yet. Oh, there you are. Hey, Gerd, from South Africa. Mechiel van den Dolder, I hope I pronounced it okay, from, I believe, the Netherlands, with two projects, and Richard Matthews from Australia with two projects, or yeah, I guess two projects there. Now, as we go through this, and again, I have to just get used to the fact that I'm looking at the camera on one computer because it has a better webcam, but the screen I'm sharing is this other computer here. So this is just a quick run through of some of the principles that I look for in terms of using ARCHICAD to its best effect. The view map where you're defining all the different working areas of the project. How clear is it organized? Are you using folders to consistently group views? Do you use clone folders? Plans, well, that's a very key thing that everyone, of course, is looking at, is how legible are they? And just to the extent of understanding how far the project has gone, do you have variety of different views, ceiling plans, site plans, furniture plans, etc. The 3D model, of course, it's very interesting to all of us who use ARCHICAD. How clean is this model? Does it look good? Does it really represent the design well? How detailed is it? Is there a site? Now, not every project needs a site. Some of them are really in an urban context where you don't need a whole lot of site information. Others, the site is a critical part of the design. It's a very steep hillside. Is there landscaping? Well, it isn't necessary, but it certainly is helpful to understand the context and to help the client, participate in the design. Sometimes the site is also important for getting approvals and showing things to neighborhood groups or for authorities to review. Elevations, of course, we all want them to be clear, clean. The sections as well. Well, as I think all of you know, ARCHICAD over the last few years has increasingly been more sophisticated, or is able to be. The models can be more detailed, so you can have a section that includes framing. You can use complex profiles to define things in much more detail than we ever could before. And in fact, with version 22, Graphisoft has taken this quite a bit further. We won't be seeing any version 22 projects today, but we will certainly, in this next year. I'm looking forward to seeing how far we can extend it. Layer combinations and layers, certainly the more sophisticated users will have a very carefully, cleanly defined sets of layers and layer combinations for not only working drawings, but for working modes. In other words, when you're working on the roof, maybe you have certain layers that are shown specifically for that part of the process. The data, are you generating schedules from the model? Are legends, are other things derived from the model? Now, not that everything has to be perfect to be best practices, but we're sort of moving more in the direction of all of the data coming from the model elements, including labeling. That's what I have a little bit lower down. Details, while you can have boilerplate or standard details, either from your own collection or manufacturers, to the extent that you can either derive your details directly from the model or match the details on top of the model views with virtual trace, for example. I think that's a good thing to aspire to. The layout book, do the sheets tell the story? Are they well organized? Is the labeling, as I mentioned, is it connected to the element data? So you're not just putting a text annotation, but you're saying, this is a label referring to that element, and the element knows what the label is. The element is actually sharing some data to the annotation. Is it a teamwork project? That's an interesting thing. Obviously, ARCHICAD has the ability to share projects both inside an office and remotely. That continues to expand with version 22, with BIM Cloud being now publicly available. There's a free version, and then there's a premium version, I guess, that has more controls. BIM, is there a structural model? Not every project has to have a structural model, but it's interesting to look at a project and say, is there a structural model? Has something been imported from IFC? How is that dealt with? Something been exported to IFC for analysis? BIMX, certainly, again, it's a great tool Graphisoft has created and continues to extend in version 22. They've got some new options. How much is it being used? We're seeing it being used to communicate with clients, with consultants, in the construction process, on site, design, build, all sorts of things. So it'd be interesting. We do have at least a couple of people who submitted BIMX files. Favorites, this is something that one of my favorite topics, so to speak, for years, because I not only created a tutorial, just sort of saying, hey, here's an opportunity that can save you time. That was one of my most popular early tutorials for ARCHICAD, but also in Master Template, I created a version of favorites, a visual array or kit of parts that you could eyedrop, because I had seen this demonstrated from some of my clients or colleagues. It's a great time saver. Graphisoft has improved the favorites, of course, over the years. I think, was it version 18? We started to have the visual, the graphic palette for displaying favorites. So how much in a project are they being used? The life cycle of a project, certainly we all start from concept or from, let's say, an existing project in as-built, and then develop it and take it eventually to drawings that are used for construction. How well organized is that sequence within the project file? I mean, it's technically possible to do a concept model in one file and then save a copy and then develop it further, and in the final version you can't really see the concept model, but it's also possible in some cases to actually keep simple versions of it as well as detailed versions of the model and the project in the same file. So that's an interesting thing to look at. And of course, presentations, we all need to show work to clients and sometimes to prospective clients or to get approvals. How much are they built into the project file? Not that every project has to have 3D views on the layouts, but they can be useful for constructability, making sure that the details and the actual structure is even clearer than 2D drawings or straight-on views would give. And they just are a great way to quickly understand what's going on. So these are the things that we're going to be looking at. You know, I've probably missed a couple of things. Maybe if you think of something else that for you is an important part of best practices, put it into the questions box. I won't probably be responding in typing to the questions box during this session very much, because I'm going to be on the mouse and showing things and talking, but I will be looking at that question box. So if you have a question or you have some input, a suggestion, or, you know, in this case, maybe something that, hey, Eric, you forgot about such and such, please just put it into the questions box. So without further ado, let us see, in terms of who we're going to start with. Now, Rich, you're on here. So even though it's super early in Australia and you may not be fully, you know, in gear, what is it, like 6:15 in the morning? Because you're a veteran of the Masters of ARCHICAD Summit, and I know you a little bit, I'd like to get you on early and have you make some comments as we go through the project. Hey, so Rich,
good morning.
Early in the morning there.
Yes.
Okay, so just a quick context here. You know, I guess I've known Rich a little bit over the years. You've participated in some of my training programs, and you were one of the presenters in the very first, I think it was the very first Masters of ARCHICAD Summit, or was it the second one for your Indian Palace? I think that maybe was.
Oh, I can't remember now.
Yeah, so the Indian Palace was an interesting project because here you are in Australia, but you were working for a client from, was it India?
No, he was from Western Australia, but he saw fell in love on a trip to India with the Jodhabai Palace in Fethikur Sikri, and wanted to model that as his home. So all of the parts and pieces were carved in India and shipped over by container, and yeah, interesting, very interesting.
It was a very elaborate and beautiful and certainly somewhat unusual project, and I remember it very visually, you know, in my mind. Now today you have got two projects here. Which one do you want me to open up first? What do you think would be most interesting?
Well, probably the Nunda, the 15 Vernon Street Nunda project.
All right, so let me get that open, and while I do that, tell us a little bit about Nunda in terms of architecturally, and tell us also a little bit about your firm, you know, how long you've been going, and are you just working by yourself? Do you have staff? Well, things like that.
Well, I'll be as quick as I can. I started off graduating out of a Diploma of Technology Building Designer course in Vancouver, and immediately got a job test piloting two 2D and a 3D programs that were worked on by architects in the Hulbert Group office. That I then became their computer operations manager, came to Australia in 1987 to put computers into the office in on the Gold Coast for the Sanctuary Cove project. That's when I was working on PCs, because I started on the very first desktop PCs, but was introduced to the Mac in a rather funny way, but not time to tell today. So, and I saw, that was also the first time I saw ARCHICAD, decided that Macs would be a better solution for that new office. And so that was version 3 of ARCHICAD. The next year I moved to Sydney for a project in Caves Beach near Newcastle here. And that's probably the most work we started off with in ARCHICAD. But yes, and I progressed there to be the support person for 3.5 years for Australia by hooking up with the then distributor. Progressed from that on to, well, I did a lot of training of architects, of course, in that time, and took over their project, started their projects, finished their projects, and have taught a semester at Newcastle Uni of ARCHICAD. And basically just been on my own since, I guess, '92. It was mainly residential projects, although I've done a few warehouse office complexes. And yeah, so new and renovations, and my biggest project at the moment is a DA that's been approved up in Brisbane, which is a 26-unit townhouse development.
Okay, excellent. So this particular project that we're going to be looking at, so I've opened it up, and as I go along the way, of course, I'm going to be filling in a few little gaps for people who are less familiar with some of the technical things, and just making sure everyone's on the same page. So Rich has sent me the file as a PLA, which is an archive file. So when you save a project, if you do save as, you can save it in different formats. So you could potentially save it in the previous version of ARCHICAD from 21 down to 20. You can save views of your whatever you're looking at as a DWG or other things. But one option is to save the project as an archive, which includes all the library parts that ARCHICAD recognizes are in use. Now, it turns out it doesn't quite do a perfect job on that, but it does mean that when Rich sent it to me, I don't have to necessarily have all the same library parts. It left out one called the fire hose cabinet. I'm sure that that's not consequential to our view. It also left out all of these textures. These are attributes, because there is a choice when you save a PLA to include textures or not, and they can make the file larger. And of course, if I had all of these handy and I could load them in, then it wouldn't be an issue. And in fact, you don't need to use a PLA if you're sending your file to someone else who has the same version of ARCHICAD and the same libraries, because in general, they can just load the libraries from their computer. But let's proceed. If necessary, we can potentially open this up. One thing that can be an issue just in studying projects that I get is if textures are missing and they're used in the latest versions of ARCHICAD, maybe starting in 20, if the texture is missing, instead of it just showing a color like gray or pink or whatever, it'll show this checkerboard pattern, which is intended to let you know this is not looking the way it's supposed to. This is, it's missing something. Now, I think in 19 we don't have that issue, but I think starting around 20, it can be really distracting because you see these sort of purple and black images. So tell us, where should we go here? We've got
we can start on that ground floor, which I presume is what you have. This was an interesting project because my developer friend and well, I do a lot of projects for him. He decided he would like to try to build it with a new system called Rytec, which is a double skinned FC panels strapped together by metal bars, basically small bars, and those are pre-cut and then core filled on site. Dropped into a slot, braced, core filled with concrete. you'll see on that image there, for instance, that there are corner pieces which then lock the walls together. You also, one of the things I've probably mentioned is I always design and draw in, or produce color drawings. In this instance, it was very useful because you'll notice there's a legend which shows that different wall types, different thicknesses will have a different color code.
Let's see where that legend is. I'm just going to zoom out to. So the legend, up in this corner here. Okay.
Top corner, yes.
All right. Quick question. So this legend, was this drawn using the 3D elements just off to the side, or?
Well, of course, because you don't want to. I don't like to have those showing up. Those would have been converted to 2D lines and fills, etc. And I think maybe, well, it could even have been a separate. No, it doesn't look like it there because you've selected the. It could have been a separate worksheet or something I might have plunked down on the drawings, but that's
okay. So in this case, I went down to the actual plan, the ground floor. They are sitting next to it. Of course, if you wanted to, you could crop this out when you place this onto the sheet. In this case, it doesn't matter. Now, as you said, this is a line. This is a group which would, I guess, probably include. So that's the text. Oh, interesting. Your text extends over here, but if I hit the tab key, this is a fill. So you basically exploded the wall into just graphics.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So this communicates well. Let's take a look in 3D just so we get a quick sense of that. Now I noticed that you have a folder for 3D views here that are based on camera positions. So one of the nice things about basing views on camera positions is that you can do a fly through, either flying from one to another position, or you can actually batch process a number of individual camera positions. Now, one limitation of this is that I don't think you can, actually, I guess you can rename it here in the view map. Originally, it would come from a particular camera position that's in the project map. But let's just take a look. So we've got looks like a 3-story building, you know, from.
So this is one of the complications on this site was the fact that when we needed to have a clearance in that garage for garbage trucks that backed in. In reality, and it turns out we didn't really need to have that. So this has got a folded slab, which is another complication we shouldn't really have dealt with when we started dealing with Rytec walls, but that was an interesting exercise to deal with.
What do you mean by a folded slab?
Well, if you took a look at one of the sections, the A section probably would be the.
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. It's been a while since I've dealt with this project, so try an E section.
So I see some things going on here.
Yeah, sorry. G.
Oh, it's interesting. So this one, the last time you opened it, you had it off in a separate window. Do you use 2 screens, or how do you?
I've got actually 3 screens.
All right. So for my purposes, I'm just going to take this. Let's see. Go to the window menu and say that I'd like to dock it. So it will then put it back into the tabs here. Just be a little bit easier for my purpose here. Yeah. All right. So here you're talking about the fact that it's a split level here.
Split level, yes.
Okay, so, and you were calling it a folded slab?
Well, that's a fairly complication fold because it's not just straight through, because in the section of the entryway, it actually wraps around that entryway. So yeah, it's that created the complication of having these walls. You can see the blue walls are different sections, so they all had to be pre-cut and specific sizes. So and fairly complex. Have you got the no? If you go down to just a second, have you got the Rytec? Yes, the Rytec shop drawing review open that I sent you.
I'm sorry, where was that? I'm not sure.
That was a PDF that I sent through, which would be good if you could open that, because that relates directly to
was that a PDF or what?
PDF, yes.
Okay, so let me see if I can find that. So here we go here. Rytec shop drawing review PDF, which you perhaps.
That's the last email I sent this morning. You scroll down, you should.
Oh, I don't see.
Keep going.
That's the last one here that I'm seeing. So.
Right. Well, it was in the second email I sent you.
Okay. Nunda final web zip and Patricia Place Kildare PDF. So now let's see if you sent it separately. So
no, it would have been attached to the file.
So I don't see that. All right, so we're going to have to go without that. You mentioned it, but I don't see it attached.
You can't share my screen for that.
Yeah, we could have you.
It might be complicated. Don't worry.
Okay.
Anyways, yes, because like I said, all those chunks of wall all had to be pre-cut. Some of them and couldn't quite. That's what that PDF shows, is how those shapes are. I had to match them all. Send them off to
one question I have,
and then they check them off.
One question I have structurally here is so the slabs here are inserted, visually they're interrupting the verticals there.
Yes.
So that is that the way that this is actually done, where you have a small piece of wall, on top of this, and so these are, even though this is what would appear to be a single wall here, it's actually made up in two separate pieces?
Yes, that's correct. So that's set in place, filled up, and then the next slab is poured on top of that.
Okay, interesting. So in terms of what was the most interesting part of this project for you from a design perspective? I mean, you mentioned some of the things about just working at the split level and these things. What else was interesting in terms of what you had to figure out?
Well, it was how to best shape those walls, I guess.
Here's another interesting one where we've got just a slight offset there.
Yes, and of course you'll notice that some of those walls also, I don't know why that one's not working correctly, but these are composite walls, and in some instance, of course, in this case, you can see how that composite, the insulation part of it runs up past the end of the slab there, right? So all of this was done with SEOs and solid element operations. And so I was making sure that all the materials in this are actually represented accurately.
Okay, so this is the 3D model here then is quite accurate. Now I'd like to look in at this particular part because, as you mentioned, you did solid element operations, and some of the things that you do in solid element operations have to be done that way. Others can be done with just complex intersections, with building materials taking precedence. Let's take a look at this particular area because it is a subtle thing. And so where would that be on the plan? Because I want to do a marquee around it.
Oh, that's a front, it's a rear.
So which story would it be? Which story should I go to for looking at it?
Which sorry, you want to, well, it doesn't really matter if you're going to do a section. Are you going to do a marquee section?
Okay, so this is yeah, I'll do a marquee, and all right, so we'll just go down to.
That's at the rear of the building.
All right, so I'll just go down to the first floor here, and so there. By the way, there are all those cameras that you defined and are showing up. So I don't know which is the front and which is the rear. I guess is this the
on your left-hand side is the rear.
Okay, and so would it be like somewhere in here?
I'm trying to see your cursor. So that yeah. So if you went above G and went down through H, below H or something, did a marquee. Yeah. Bold. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So we're going to take a look at just that slice there. All right, so there's exactly what we're seeing in the section. Isn't that great? So you're, I mean, I'm not being facetious. It's just when people tell me it's just too much work to get the sections looking right from the model, I say, you just have to understand how to fit pieces together. And whoops. So let's just, I'm going to change one setting here, which is right now we're seeing the edges all in gray. That's where, of course, I'm cutting with the marquee. And if I go to the view menu and I go to 3D view option, I'm sorry, elements in 3D view, filter and cut elements in 3D. This is sort of non-intuitive in the sense of how would I change that gray? Well, it has to do with how I'm looking at the cut elements in a marquee. And it says use element attributes here. That's interesting. So why is that gray? Because it should really.
Well, are we missing the texture?
Yeah, probably. That would be it. And in fact, all right. Now let's just talk a little bit about this. You've got a piece of it is a wall that's going up.
Yeah, I don't know why that's not cutting there. Because that's not the way I left it. You must have been messing around with my model, Eric.
I haven't messed around with your model, but let's look at that section here.
Oh, I remember that.
For the section, which one was it? It was the G section here.
Yeah.
So yeah, in fact, here's.
Yes, interesting.
Okay, so there is a little mistake, or something that went bonkers in your model. Maybe it happened before you sent it, because I haven't been modifying the model. I just don't.
Well, like I said, I did. This is on an older disk, like a backup disk off on my other server. So I had to make sure I related all of the library items, although that shouldn't really make any difference. So I always worry a bit when I'm trying to reassign using the drawing manager all of the linked, the view maps and the PDFs, etc. that I use. So that could happen in that, although, like I said, that seems a bit odd because it really shouldn't be cutting it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all of a sudden it's recalculating this here. Now, I guess the point that I was making, aside from the fact that this should have been trimmed off most likely, is that you were doing this in two separate walls. You had, the wall, it looks like just the surface with the insulation.
Oh, yes, and that is because the Rytec wall needs to be, a particular color and identified as, but the internals of every wall could be different. So that may be a 150 mil Rytec wall, but the internal surface in that instance is insulated, whereas in another instance it could just be Villeboard, in the interior just be Villeboard. So you have a different. So yes, so I've actually got double walls there.
Okay, so you've done it double in this particular case because of the way it's fabricated and specified. You said these things are done offsite, did you say?
They're done offsite, yes.
Right, and then the additional materials on the inside here are they then?
They're applied. No, they're applied on site.
Right. Okay. All right. So then,
if you go down to in the view map to RITEC second floor reconciliation, about just past the stairs, well,
RITEC first floor markups.
Second floor conciliation. Have you got that there in the view maps?
Right. Second floor reconciliation. All right. There we go.
Just go to the D section.
Which one?
The RITEC, D RITEC section.
Okay, we'll do that. Oh, interesting. Well, this is a whole different view with the seeing the.
So that's cut through the entryway.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll notice that all those labels actually label the specific cut of the wall that would be, that RITEC would have to supply. Now they don't show there because, of course, being a common material, the joints don't show. I've got somewhere else I might have.
Okay, so here is a piece, and we've got this label F07B, and there it is. So basically, in terms of BIM and data, you have got this element with the designation, and the label is coming from that. So if I were to select the label here, the label, when I hovered over it and went to pre-select it, it's indicating that it's attached to that element. And what is it if I double click on it? Whoops, if I go.
Yeah, that's really, it's not as sophisticated. I would have done this like Tim Ball does it with the newer versions of ARCHICAD, but we didn't have that function there. So that is, but that is still an ID.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so the ID attached to the wall.
Yeah, so just as a point for future reference for everyone, and Rich, you're well aware of this, we can now make labels have automatic referencing to variety of data from the element. So we can say this label is associated to that element, which Rich already had, but instead of it being just pure text, which then manually has to be coordinated, it can be picking up the information from this element. Now I realize that we're at 1:40, so in other words, we've gone at least 25 minutes on this project. What I'd like to do is give you like 5 more minutes on this project, just to say what else would be interesting to look at.
Well,
yeah. And then
just quickly, those roof panels are actually thermal roof panels, so they're one piece, and they come in, what's the width? I think 750 or something, and they just clip together. So that whole roof on that building went on in fully completed in 2 days, I believe it was. So it's a very fast and efficient and thermally efficient system. I haven't split them, I don't think. I think I've just made it just one solid roof, but they do come in widths, craned into place, clipped together. That creates some complications in the sense of electrical and all the rest of it, but that's another issue. Yes, the other thing I might, when I quickly look at this, if you go to the, just 1 second, I need to open up my, as those 3D screens, some people might be interested in. I mean, I don't know what the experience is, but if you go down to 3D views near the bottom, just above this, sort of the below details, worksheets, details, and 3D views in the view map.
Mm-hmm.
And if you went to, I guess, any one of that, to start off with the top panel.
Is this what you're referring to here?
Well, I should it probably would be better if we went to the layout and went to so about halfway down, CD24.
Wait, layout, CD24. Okay, CD24.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are, custom sunscreens. So they're the actual profiles for the edges and the pieces that go in there. So that's how I laid those up. So they're actually 3D.
Mm-hmm.
It was
so if I say open the source view, let's just take a look. So this is a source view. If I select any element, it is a slab here. Now, This is, for those of you who maybe are less familiar with this part of ARCHICAD, we are in a view that's based on the 3D. It is called a 3D document view. That means that we can put in text and labels in here, but these elements came directly from the model. Now this is a view that actually we can say open the 3D source, because right now we can't rotate around. We can only just zoom in and out and possibly, well, annotate it. If I say open 3D source, now we're in a live 3D view which has those elements. And of course, you've set it up with a particular layer combination. Is that what you did to isolate it?
I would have done it, yes. Can't remember now, but I always, when I create my library parts, I always have them on a library part layer. But this probably I would have it specifically, because obviously I don't want this showing up in the rest of the drawing, so those library parts are switched off. In this instance, I probably had a special layer for grouping these.
All right, so I can see that in terms of your layer structure, you've got a layer combination that's active library items construction. And in fact, that turns off almost everything except for a few special layers at the bottom. So basically, you're isolating your work at that particular time when you want to construct library parts, or in this case, annotate a special view with this layer combination.
And just while you're there, I think it's worthwhile mentioning, you may notice that my layering system, which started from way back when, I particularly like, because it groups all. It's a redundant system, because you notice the extensions, all the fills are together, all the lines are together, markers, etc. If you go up to the top, one of the things that used to really bug me was that walls were usually at the bottom of the list, and in the old days, particularly, your scrolling was pretty slow, and you always had to go to the bottom of the list. And or if you said exterior walls, interior walls, they weren't necessarily next to each other in the list. So my system is that 00s are walls, 01 are slabs and beams, columns and beams. And then I have slabs, which are ceilings. And generally speaking, you may not agree, but if you take a look at my list, you would be able to tell what's on, what the layer consists of quite readily. And all of the 3D layers are at the beginning, and all the 2D layers are following after that. So it's an easy way to group stuff as well. And I also use a numbering system for my layer combinations. It's not particularly sophisticated, but it's basically sort of groups things into the different types of plans, and shuffles out things like electrical plans not in with the general floor plans, etc. 3D stuff, the elevation sections are 3, 9. Look, like I said, it's not particularly sophisticated, but more to the point is the layer combinations. I find it being very easy to find anything. If you're looking for a fill, you just go to that. You just go 09, and there should be your fill, whatever it's been named.
Okay. Well, I'll just point this out just as a general comment. One of the things I like is that you've got, well, first of all, that you've thought this through for your needs. And so you haven't just sort of accepted what Graphisoft has done out of the box. Secondly, you've got things that relate to actual plans, like floor plans or electrical plan, etc. But you also have things like library items construction, where this is a mode for doing something, and temporary kitchen plan. So you're essentially using this very flexibly and deliberately to give you convenience, to organize things, to know where they are. And I like the fact that you've grouped the walls, slabs, etc. in a sensible order, with the annotation in a separate area. Now, when I click on something like floor plans here, I'm seeing that things like stairs and objects, electrical things are turned off. Now, you don't have them locked. Now, that's just something. Are you aware that if you lock the layers that are hidden, that you can hide them from the list?
Well, probably I hadn't thought about that, Eric.
Okay.
That's probably a good point. I mean, I guess sometimes, though, like you'll be into, you might be in the floor plans, but I want to have a quick look at the electrical. Well, then, I just go in and switch it on temporarily, so if I go in and out, I don't have to worry about it. And because of my organization, I can very quickly go to some place. I mean, obviously, I usually would lock the boundary lines and a few other things that would stay locked that I don't want to have ever shifted. But and like I said, if I go up to if I'm in the drawing and I just go to select an individual element and I want to change its layer or something, I want to make sure that layer is available. So yeah, so I tend not to lock them and disappear them, because that can be
Right. Okay. So I'm just gonna. I think it's a matter of personal taste, and sort of what you find will be most helpful. But just the point I was making is that if we were in a particular view and we didn't want to accidentally create a new element or modify it, put an element onto a layer that didn't apply, you can make it so that the layers that are turned off are locked, and then they actually disappear from that list.
Yeah.
But I understand that it does mean that you have to do some extra steps if you want to grab things from that lock layer or put things onto that hidden layer, because when they're locked, you can't do that. Now, there were a couple of questions before we move on. Dean Johnston says, do you model the stairs from scratch, or are they ARCHICAD parts?
If you want to those stairs particularly, because they're custom built and they're custom stair wood hard. I don't think even with the new stair tool you'd be able to do it. They're definitely so there should be a stair. Should be a
so
no. There's actually an actual in the view map. There's a stair folder.
So we're in the view map.
No, I think it's higher up.
Stair. Okay, so look at stair.
So if you want, yeah.
Okay. All right. So this, if we select it, we've got a slab here. We've got a supporting piece that's also made with a slab tool, trimmed undoubtedly to this, and this element here is
the center.
Well, it's interesting. I selected it. It's a slab. How did you get a slab that goes like this?
Well, you got to be clever. Well, no, because you're looking at that actually you're looking at that on all of this is constructed.
Lying
okay. Down. Okay.
All right. So this is you're drawing essentially the profile of all of these elements perpendicular to the floor plan, and then you save this as a library part or turn it into a morph, or what do you do?
And I look at it as an elevation from the top, and that converts it into the correct orientation. So,
okay.
So for instance,
if I look at this here, I'm just going to do this because this is an interesting approach. All right, so this is what we were looking at, and this element here is a slab. Why is that? Because this is just lying on the side, so like a tilt up type of process. Interesting. So that's an interesting way to do it. So then you combine all of these and save them as a library part rotated.
Yeah, I just look at that. If you imagine that first view as being a floor plan,
Mm-hmm.
you look at the north elevation. That's what I look at when I ask it to go to 3D. And and then I just save that as a library part, and all those parts and pieces are in their correct position. It's a lot easier too working with that, particularly when you're looking at slopes, etc., than trying to work at it in a real true 3D sense, because you can very accurately lay everything out.
Right. Okay. So Todd Hotchkiss adds or asks, where is the project located? Is it in a hot climate?
It is. It's in Brisbane, in Queensland. So it's hence you'll see the extra insulation. There's obviously the ARCHICAD gives a certain value, but because it's concrete FC paneling. If you just can you go to the layout and do the cover shot? See, I'd just like to see. That's probably a better cover sheet. Yeah.
All right.
No, that's not. I do have a final photograph of that, but yeah, no, that just does show the textures a bit better though.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I tend not to get too. It depends on the project, but this project has been finished and looks pretty good in reality.
Mm-hmm. Now, just a quick question here. So this is a drawing that is your list of sheets, and so
that's, oh yes, sorry.
Yeah, so if I open that up, is this this is an index? Okay, which is perfect. So basically, that's a list here, and you're basically saying that it's the subset is the this particular one, as opposed to you have more sheets in here. So this is the CD set. So you're not including the RITEC set, etc.
Not including the RITEC and the draft and all the rest yet.
Yeah. Okay. Just so that is just for those of you who may find that of interest. You can have indexes that list different groups of drawings, like just your structural drawings or something like that. You can have them that list the entire layout book. But if you want to be specific, you can choose one or more subsets and say, I only want to list those particular sets. So Rich, what I'd like to do is to switch gears to another presenter, but I'd like to keep you on the line so you can make some comments here and there, give your perspective. Is that okay with you?
Fine with me, thank you.
All right. So Mechiel, I'll just keep checking to see what you type in. So here we have what looks like about a 6-story building, possibly with some subterranean things. I'm just going to look at some things that are interesting to me at first glance. So what is this element here? This element is an object. It's on a certain layer, balustrades here. If I open up the settings for it, we'll see that it doesn't have much in the way of control. So this would be a custom created object here. And so I'm going to ask you, did you create this with just some slabs that you drew or thin walls on the floor plan? How did you create that? So that's one quick question there. Now if I select the wall here, now this is an interesting thing. I'm just looking at it structurally. Okay, so the wall we can see has all of these bump outs. So if I go in and say edit selected composite or profile, we can see that it is a complex profile, and it does have, of course, all of this shape here. So we have these individual components that are uniform down here, and then we have the detail there. So that is just interesting to see how that's being done in terms of level of detail. Going to look now. So Dave says maybe the microphone is plugged in wrong. So one thing, Mechiel, you had mentioned that you had a computer with a microphone or with the webcam separate from your normal working computer where you could have the project open. Do you happen to have a microphone on that other computer even though you don't have a webcam? If that's the case, then potentially you could connect up on the other computer using the same link. All right, but I'm looking here at, so what is this element here? This element that we're looking at in terms of the railing is a wall. And again, let's just see what this is. It is a complex profile that you've got, and it's made of, I presume, some metal and some glass. So just in terms of looking at how things are being constructed. Now here's an interesting thing just in terms of the modeling. We have what looks like, and I'll just zoom out a little bit. Certainly it looks like a slab, but it's actually a piece of wall wrapped around here. So you're doing a lot of things with complex profiles, which is great to see. So we can see, I just heard something. Was that maybe Richard?
No, I'm sorry, I coughed.
Okay. So Mechiel, I'm not hearing anything there. So it's interesting. I'm seeing it indicate that you're talking, but there must be something going on. Whenever you're typing, I'm seeing something. Yeah, this is very odd because it shows on my screen that you're talking, Mechiel, but I can't hear anything. So it's like your microphone is defective, but I don't know what it is. All right, so we'll just look at a few more things. Perhaps we can have you on another session where we can work out the technical details ahead of time. So main thing I'm finding interesting just at first glance at your project, and really it is just limited to what jumps out at me, is your creative use of complex profiles here. So we've got this entire piece here that wraps around, and it's actually got a gap in there. I'm not sure how that is is actually constructed with the gap. But if we go back to that 3D view and zoom in on it, so we can see the shape. Now it's interesting and nice that ARCHICAD is actually cleaning these two up nicely, and that it's interesting that it's, instead of making a diagonal, it's actually sort of chopping this out, and yet we are getting a nice clean edge. There is a little bit of a line there. Or let's just see if there's anything else that just jumps out from a modeling perspective. So we have some, I presume these are solar panels on the roof, and this is an object that we see it in 3D if we look here. Okay, so this is a standard library part or a sophisticated library part that you're putting in. So you're using a standard part and of course arraying it. That's good. Let's just take a look at your layout book here. So, and by the way, so Nathaniel says, is Mechiel muted by the operator? No, I am not. I can mute people, but in this case, their microphone is showing as active. So, and yeah, Don is saying, is the recording computer controlling the volume? No, I mean, I didn't do anything separately there. And Dwayne says, I see that attendee 24 is talking, but not hearing anything either. So yeah, we're, okay. Now, Vic says, try muting Richard to see. I will do that, but I don't think that's going to make a difference. I say, mute Richard. All right, so Richard is now muted. Mechiel, go ahead and try talking. Yeah, it's not coming through. So, all right, so we will, yeah, all of the guesses, I appreciate you're all attempting to help, but unfortunately they're not working. And I do keep on hearing little blips, like it's sort of like there was a defective microphone there. That's all I can guess at. All right, so if I go in here, what are we looking at on this page here? Oh, this is interesting. So we have, now this is sideways. Are you printing out your sheets differently? Okay, so we do have some sheets that are one orientation, some that are a different one. Now, I'm always interested in seeing, so this is a drawing on a sheet. And when I say open the source view, how much is it manual versus how much is it anything else? So if I select this, this is just some plain text. So you've got this in here's a block of text. Now it's interesting, we've got all of these guidelines. Let me just remove all guidelines there. That cleans up our view. But I can see that each one of these is a plain text element. Now there's nothing wrong with that at all, but it is certainly possible that these could be put together, even though they're different formats. One of the things I know in the past with ARCHICAD, for people who came from a long time ago, is that you know, you might have to put things in different blocks in order to get different formatting. Or if this was coming from another program and you're copying and pasting, it might come in different pieces. But right now, I don't quite see why these are separated. Let's just look at a couple other things. So I'm just going to jump to the next group here of views. And okay, so we do have site information. Question is, this is a drawing. Here, if I open the source view, what are we seeing? So we are on a plan view. We're seeing the building, and we're seeing the building with a simplified view, which makes sense because obviously it's reduced in size. That's done by, let's see, it'd probably be the model view options here. So we have a model view for a site 1 to 500 scale, you know, which would be, I don't know, in the US, what would that be, about 32nd to an inch or so, I don't know, whatever. 1 inch equals 40 feet, I guess would be something like that. Any event, so there we've got that particular model view option, and in that model view option, we've got the, where is it? The doors and windows are only showing the openings, so it's simplifying this. And now in terms of the walls being simplified, that would be, I think, be controlled in the graphic overrides now. But let's just say, what do we got here? So this is a fill. So these are lines and fills, and I don't know whether they came from some other source originally and were brought in, or if this is actually drafted as part of it. Now, being lines and fills, we're not going to see it in 3D. At least I wouldn't expect that. If we go back to that BIMX view, so we are seeing then, and I'm just waiting for it to refresh. So we're seeing a very simplified site here, whereas on the sheet, we've got a lot more data. So one thing I'll ask you, Mechiel, is did you consider doing any more context in the site in 3D, or was it really just not necessary? This was just the only thing that was necessary was the 2D information. Pure text, so DWG, so things I guess came from DWG, and just 2D. All right, so now I know where you've been typing because it's not showing up in the questions area, it's showing up in the chat section. All right, so I think probably we'll call it here, unless there's something else that you think would be particularly of interest to our viewers. And then we'll bring up Gerd for a very short thing, and then Dean. Hopefully, if Dean we'll be able to hear him when we bring him on. You can stay in chat, Mechiel, just because I've got it open now. So Bob Schwenke asks, how can we get Google Earth into the 3D view? So I haven't worked with this much in recent years. I think I tried to do something a couple of months ago when it came up in an ARCHICAD coaching program call, and frankly, I don't remember. We used to be able to use the Google Earth connection that was built into ARCHICAD, maybe 13, 14, 15, to bring in automatically a site into ARCHICAD as a model. It was limited resolution, but it did actually show both the texture, in other words, the satellite view, and generally the grade, in other words, is it a hilly site or not? I know I was able to do that with one of the clients as well recently, but can't remember the steps. One thing is you can work with SKP files now much more easily. And so with Google Earth, I think you can save it in a SketchUp format. And that may be the way I brought it in. I can't remember now. So I wish I had more detail. All right. Okay, so Mechiel says you feel muted. Well, you are, unfortunately, you're just have that technical issue. So I'm sorry. So we'll tell you what, we'll maybe between now and another session, we'll just have a private little tech session, and we'll see if we can get this worked out. So with your permission, then I'm going to go on to Gerd, and even though Gerd, you're muted, we can at least try to open that up. And here we have Gerd. Now, which one of these files would be, well, you have a BIMX file and you have the BH Rever or Revo. So let's go, that is ARCHICAD 21 International. So I'm going to just open it up from here. So, by the way, out of this call, those of you, how many of you have started to work with 22 actively, you know, like as your main tool, now that ARCHICAD 21 is released in the US and at least some of the countries around the world? Just curious, and if you are, is it working pretty well, or, you know, what do you think? Okay, so this is, we're going to be doing then Gerd. Okay, so, and we'll keep this short just because obviously we really would be better to have you talk, but I don't want to have you go empty-handed. So we'll go to the BH River House PLA. So, all right, so Eric Lutz says 22 is working well. Ken Andrews, I've started with 22 and it seems very good so far. Some people are saying not yet, a few of you. Gerald Hoffman seems to be quite good. Bob Schwenke says, I've jumped on it immediately, having some issues with old versions of ARCHICAD. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean when you try to also open old versions, or you're talking about old files. And Joe says, we don't have 22 in New Zealand yet. Okay, all right. So let's see, skip this here. And so I'm going to bring up, Gerd did write some extensive notes in the email, so we can at least refer to them in terms of just knowing about the project here. Okay. All right. So, project is off-grid, energy efficient, and constructed within the guidelines of a UNESCO biosphere-controlled natural environment. It floats above the dense bush. He's in South Africa. It overlooks a savanna area and a small stream, hence it's called the River House. The owner is also the first-time contractor and has a small, low-skilled workforce. And BIMX has been morale boost among the local workforce. They can see and manipulate the views of just about everything they're building, so that's really helped. Project notes, which you sent separately, have some interesting descriptions of the structure. The model is complete. Layout book has everything. BIMX hypermodel is also included. And you're working on your skills. In South Africa, you're sort of in a somewhat isolated, lonely mission here. So let's take a look then at the River House. And some missing parts, I think, favorites. So we are missing a couple of little things. I don't think we can probably just ignore that. And so if we go up to from one story to another, we can see, now you've got stories here, foundation level roof structure. So it looks like you're separating out different stories for different uses, say for roofs. So obviously this isn't a story per se, it's just a level or organization that can have some issues there. Ceiling board layout, But maybe, of course, this might just be one level. Let's just take a look in 3D so we can understand this. And I see, so in terms of general BIM organization or ARCHICAD organization, so I just zoomed out to fit in window here. Or when we have these views here, this is something, suggestion for Gerd and for others. You can go in and rename them. So in other words, if I double click on this view, it was a close-up. So I could just call this close-up of front. I don't know where it is, whether it's a front or not. But now that's easier to know what's the difference between that and this 3D view, which is perspective from ground level. So that's something I would recommend that you do so that you know what they are. Now, it looks like you have some other ones here that do have some names. And so maybe you were doing it here, but these were just some working views. I don't know. But in general, what I would do, let's look at some of the other things about this structure. So here's very interesting, is that you're using this to communicate the construction. And you mentioned this in terms of the BIMX, but obviously you're helping the inexperienced workforce and contractor to sequence the construction. Is that right, Gerd? I can see there. Okay, so I'm just looking for your. Now, Dean says not hearing me. Are other people having a problem hearing me?
I can hear you. Okay, Eric.
Okay, so Dean, maybe Dean just had a temporary audio issue. So Gerd, okay, so now Gerd, you're putting it into the chat. All right, so let me look here. 22, deliberately on hold until you've sorted some of the forgotten functions of previous versions. Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by forgotten functions. Maybe there's some things that aren't working in 22 that you relied on. You had a question about how to migrate favorites correctly into 22. That is an interesting challenge. And Mechiel said he had to go. Okay, so Gerd, roof is one level but consists of various elements and layers. Okay, so in terms of, just a comment, in terms of when you have stories, you can use stories for a variety of purposes. Of course, the primary purpose is to correspond to the natural vertical separations of the building and to our sort of natural construction practice of having a first floor plan, a second floor plan, etc. When you have different parts of, let's say, a lower roof and an upper roof or different things, I would tend more towards using layers than having them on separate stories. It makes it somewhat easier to coordinate certain things, but I'm sure you have some good reasons for doing them on separate stories. What I am interested in more is just, let's say, how is this view defined? If we go to this view, we can see that it's got a layer combination, steel frame plus trusses. So you have a number of different ones for framing. So you've got these layer combinations that turn on or off different groups of elements for your purposes. So that's the main thing that we're looking at here when I go to end frame plus walls. And so this would obviously have a different layer combination. And then, of course, what I like here that's very clearly organized, you have a prefix that's the direction, I guess, N and S for north and south, and you have multiple variations so that it's easy to understand what's going on and their relationship. And now you have wall panels only. So let's just see, are these, in terms of panels, okay, so this is a panelized structure, is I'm guessing from just the way you refer to it as a panel. And now this is an interesting thing. We have a lower wall and we have this upper one. I'm wondering, maybe you can type in, say, why this wasn't done as a single wall. Is this fabricated separately that sits on top here? So let's see. You use both, and I'm not quite sure. Or you use both, probably stories and layers combinations. Okay, so Eric Lutz says, show his story setup, please. Okay, let's do that. So let's go. So if I go to story settings. By the way, this is one way that you can get to story settings. You can also do it from the document or design menu here. All right, so we are seeing, let's say, ground level to roof structure 2890, and then to roof covering going up here. So actually, each one of these stories is has a significant gap of 3 meters, here 10 feet roughly. So why was I confused? What was I going on about roof structure? Oh, you know what? I apologize. I misinterpreted this. I was looking at your numbering: 1, roof structure. So I'm just going to go back to the plan. 2, roof covering. All right, so I was interpreting these because of the numbers as separate stories. But now I get it, that this is, this particular roof covering is from the 2 roof covering story, and the roof structure. Oh no, these are separate stories. They are separate stories. So I'm a little confused, but that's all right. I can't expect to understand it perfectly. So Gerd, given that we're a little hampered here, give me 2 things that you think would be interesting for me to bring up, that just are beyond the fact that you are doing the sort of structural framing and isolating views for communication with your inexperienced contractor and workforce. Okay, Dan Wyckoff has a comment. River House looks in the vein of Glen Murcutt. Was the building purposely thin to allow for passive cooling? Okay, and Heralder asked for a section. Okay, let's take a section. So we go to sections here.
Eric, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
You mentioned the separate bit of wall sitting on top of the other wall. One of the problems you get if you put a wall that extends up higher than the walls around it and join it with another wall is you often don't get a nice clean intersection at a corner. So okay. One of the reasons I have a separate wall on basically an upper level for gables and where you sort of have split levels of walls is to try to get those corners reacting nicely. Otherwise, if you do have another wall up higher and it joins in with that, it doesn't clean it up properly.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a reason to isolate in some cases. There may be some ways that, in terms of junction order or some other settings, that might allow it to be done, more as a full wall. And ARCHICAD gradually is getting better at doing all of this stuff together. So I would at least keep exploring it. So, but your point is well taken. Now I see Gerd says panels are modular 600 by 2400. So that would be, 600 millimeters? That would be about 2 feet by 8 feet. Can be fixed horizontal or vertical. Offcuts are used in various ways to minimize waste. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if they are 600 by 2400, then so when you have let's say a normal wall for a room, would you be stacking them horizontally on top of each other? Is that the way it would work, Gerd? So let's just see, also zoom in on this. So so this is an object here. Okay, so it's on the roof trusses layer, and obviously it just has a very simple view. It's long and it's a purlin. Okay, so it's using a standard library component. Were you using the roof wizard to create this, or were you just modeling this piece by piece and repeating them here? And let's look at the element here. Also on roof trusses, purlin. Okay, so you're using the purlin element for a variety of things. And let's just look. This particular volume is just a fill. Okay, so this is just a fill on overlaying it. This is the roof here, and so this is empty space here. I guess with, I'm guessing that would that be insulated in there? And then what's the underside? The underside is another roof element making the ceiling. All right. Okay, so Gerd says some, not all of the modular panels have been placed as separate elements in discussion with client and contractor. Okay. All right. So in terms of the framing that you've got here for the roof supports, and that we would see in, if we go to this 3D view here. So we've got, oh, so here's an interesting shape. This is an object that is, okay, so it is just an angular piece. I was thinking that it had some more complex shape. So what is this? This is one object that does have a more complex form. Okay, so is this, it looks like this is something that you fabricated yourself. So this would be just an interesting thing. Did you draw this much like we saw with Rich, just horizontally on plan, and then save it as an object that was rotated? Okay, so Gerd had said a minute ago, have a look under 3D views, roof construction to bottom of the views. All right, so here's roof construction. Okay, roof structure, trusses only. Okay, there we go. And roof structure, full structure, no ceiling here. Okay, and structure plus ceiling. Okay, all right. So let's see what other comments. Okay, well, so the my question right now is these elements here that have a number of pieces here. Did you model that lying down on the floor plan and then turn it into an object and rotate it, or how did you create that? Okay, so Gerd writes, trusses are modeled and rotated. Okay, all right. Well, Gerd, it's interesting. We'll just take one more overview of the 3D here. So the comment from Dan Wyckoff was that it looks in the vein of Glenn Murcutt, was building purposely built thin to allow for passive cooling. So it might comment there. Comment from Geraldar saying nice and clear model. FDVD Veen says, I like the clarity of the components. And Constantino says, beautiful plans, well structured and organized, thumbs up. So definitely getting some approvals from and appreciation from people. Well, here's an interesting little thing. Always catches my eye when we have 3D elements. What is going on? Why can't I zoom in? Don't know what's, want to zoom in on this? Okay, it's for some reason it's not, things are slow. Oh, there, now we can go in. Okay, so what do we have here? So that is a swing reel, 21. Okay, so it's a reel for, I guess, the fire hose there. So here we have stairs. This is a beam. And let's just take a look at your stair. So this is actually a slab, and this one is an inclined block. Okay, so you modeled this particular staircase with just a bunch of pieces, which is fine. Whoops, I wanted to get just one of the railing pieces here. Okay, so this is a combined balustrading rail parallel bars. Okay, so you made it out of a bunch of pieces. Have you done much work with the stair tool in version 21? Would be one question, Gerd. Gerd says climate considerations are paramount. Okay, so that was an answer to the building design. Constructability and communicating various elements and methods is critical, and the stair was done before the new stair tool was added. Okay, fair enough. Be interesting to see. Certainly it looks like something that the new stair tool could handle pretty gracefully and probably with more finesse than earlier stair options. Like, for example, having the tread be broken up into two pieces. I don't think that was a built-in option in previous ones, but now you could easily define a tread that had that profile. Okay. All right, so Gerd, I think we'll move on. More comments. Nice work from Dean Johnston. Hey, Dean, we'll get onto you now. Tom says, Eric, do I have ideas to make better BIMX models, say layout design, views, etc.? Any ideas? Okay, so let me get Dean on the line. We can talk a little bit about BIMX as I bring that up. Gerd, thank you for volunteering this. Hopefully we can connect up separately to work out the audio issue. As I said, this was an experiment, and we made the best of it. At least I hope we're able to at least give people a glimpse of your work, and well, we can see your face and appreciate you. So thank you for staying up late. I guess it's getting close to midnight there. So let us go on now to Dean. So let me go here and say Dean Johnston here.
Eric.
Dean.
Aloha. Aloha.
Oh.
I'm hiding behind the third screen. No camera.
All right. Well, that's fine. But hooray, we can actually hear you. That's a relief. I don't know why your microphone thing wasn't working.
Next time we'll do tests before we.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely. I'll make it a rule that if I do have a guest like you and Gerd and Richard, that we'll make sure we do a tech test before having you on, because obviously it's frustrating to everybody. All right, so now at least we can talk. So we are looking at Hokonui Frost in a moment. Tell us a little bit about your work and your project.
Very little. I'm a one-man band here in Maui, Hawaii, working on mostly commercial, light commercial projects. I started with ARCHICAD as 6.5 when I started graduate school in '98 at UH. Progressed through to AC11, which I stuck with for about 10 years. And last year I upgraded to 21, and I'll be up to 22 when I get a chance. This is unique for me because the clients are in a really rainy, windy spot, and they like the idea of metal buildings, so they build a metal frame, put a roof on it, and then pour the slabs and infill with the walls, so that the builders could have gentler weather for the construction process. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We looked at a number of different systems. Like I was promoting SIPs for a while to roof and even wall the structure, but being out here in Hawaii, it's too unfamiliar of a turf. So these walls are framed conventionally with 2x, though we may end up with light gauge metal framing. It's still in the bid process.
Okay, so you're using standard composites, so just 2x.
Actually, it's not a composite wall. It's just a wall.
Okay. Okay. It is a composite wall because it has multiple skins. It's not a
yes,
complex.
It is. Oh, that's true. Yes. Okay. Sorry.
It's not a complex profile, so it's uniform from top to bottom with skins. Okay, which is sensible for this. Okay, we have a fireplace. This is actually a built-in object here. So I'm just looking at the 3D element. So we do have an object that is Z beams 21. And so that object, well, it's a long piece, so it's a little hard to visualize. It is parametric here. Where is this particular object? So this is actually in the standard ARCHICAD library 21 in structural steel framing and metals. Okay, so I haven't been looking at that, and looks like they've added, you know, some interesting options there. So you used a standard library part. You just set up certain dimensions, etc., that gave you what you needed. And if we just zoom in on this a little bit, we can see the shape as it goes around. And when we have, in terms of the roof surface, so this is a roof surfacer object. So for those of you who are a little unfamiliar with that, if you draw an element like a roof or a wall or a slab, you can use what's called accessories within ARCHICAD's goodies. So these are things that you can download for free from Graphisoft's website. If you go to the help menu and you go to, it may be called ARCHICAD goodies, it may be called ARCHICAD downloads, or in this case here in the US, it's ARCA Plus downloads. So these are additional things that that you can download from Graphisoft's site. The accessories will basically take, hey, here's an element like a roof, and I want to make another object that knows the shape of the roof, knows the angle of the roof, knows the perimeter of the roof, and does something on top of it or beside it. And so in this case, the roof surfacer is got certain rules for, you know, is it standing seam or is it some type of tile, etc. And this preview and this image here, they will adjust for the as based on the roof. Now in this case, you have a very simple roof shape, but if we were to cut this out or do other things with it, it would actually follow the roof underneath. Now the roof itself, if I go to the roof tool, I'm just wondering if we have that visible. If I go to the roof tool and hit Command A.
It's not visible. It's not visible because it's only a standing seam roof over purlins.
Okay, so that's an interesting little thing, is that you had to create a roof to create the roof surfacer, but then you hit it or you deleted it?
Hit it.
Hit it, okay.
I think if you delete it, the roof surface might disappear, but that's a question.
Yeah, very, that would be my guess as well. Okay. So in terms of roofs, I just selected all roofs. We can see the ceiling is done as a roof, and then these, what are they up here? They
solar panels.
Solar panels, okay. And you did them with just roof elements as a quick way of doing that. Okay, perfect. So tell us what's interesting about this project. You know, are there some other 3D views that show context?
If you go to, now I'm not in it, sorry. Let's see, there's construction sequence. If you just go to that, it'll be a little bit similar to what Gerd just showed. Yeah, I mean, essentially, this is what we're starting with. The frame, the footings in the frame, and then the roof would go on, and then, but in this case, I just for the clarity to the contractors, I wanted them to see we're going to do the slabs after the roof is on as flat work, and so that's kind of the
okay,
the structural sequence. Now, what I found challenging and interesting was because this is based on a commercial steel building with their own eave and rake and gutter flashings, I had PDFs of those profiles, and I was able to make the profiles for the gutters and the rake eaves using the profiler. But the challenge on the horizontal runs, it wasn't a problem, but for the rakes, I really struggled with that. I made them out of a profiler, I think, and then I turned them into a morph, which I could angle.
So show us where we've got this context.
Well, you're looking in that lower left-hand corner. You're seeing a rake flashing with that odd shape.
Couldn't he do it with a beam by doing a profile beam? Because you can angle the beam. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I don't know how to do that. I tried to create. This was what I was able to come to, and it's not it's semi okay. If you
All right, so
when I have the
okay, so let's look at this then.
so this shows the horizontal ridge flashing. That's kind of proper. It's two pieces actually. It's an over flashing and an under flashing. If we look at a section, you can see the two components. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm faced with, is a funky corner. And for the purposes of my client, this is okay for right now. But
now let's just see if we have the option here for white model. There, okay, so now it's a little bit easier. So by the way, this is, I'm using changing the 3D viewing style here to give, attempt to give different clarity. So with the white model, in this case, it's a little bit easier to see just this particular issue going on. All right, so if we look at this, this is a morph, and this is the object. So the one that is a morph, you created originally with
the profiler to an object, and then the object I couldn't rotate to the rake angle of 5 degrees. So I changed that to a morph, and then in the section I could rotate the morph to 5 degrees. But the problem with the morph is I can't change the length. So so that's a little frustrating.
Okay, so in terms of changing the length of a morph, you should be able to do it. It's tricky in terms of manipulation, but let's just see just a quick thing, and this may be useful just as a technique. One thing is I've got this selected, and let's say I didn't really need to see any of the other context. I just want to be able to lengthen this, change it in some way. So one thing I can do is I can use the option that says show just what's selected in 3D. This then isolates that element, and later I can go back and say show all in 3D, and it'll be there. So now I've got this morph. Now how can I edit the morph? If I go to the morph tool, deselect it. Actually, if I go to the arrow tool and switch to sub-selection, this is available only when you're trying to select morphs. If you click using this sub-selection icon on a wall, it'll say there's nothing there that I can select. But here I can select the line, another line, and no, I ended up, ended up grabbing the wrong one, but I can just shift click to deselect that. And then take this one, and this one. All right, so these are all edges. Now, if I wanted to move these, I can press down here, and then you can see that I can say that I want to reposition. Now, that's one point here. Let's see, I guess if I just do the move, you can see what's happening here. So I can do it along this line. Now, if I press the Shift key, we may be able to lock it, or let's see, the option A. No, let's see, I'm trying to lock it on the angle. I think we can also set up a guideline here, but I'm just going to point out that if I zoom out way to where I can see the other end, which may be, yeah, so now you can see the other end, and I'll just take it along here. So you can see I just shortened the whole thing. So that's one thing is it's a little bit fiddly here, and this isn't the only way that you can do it, but I can do it this way. Now let's say that I wanted a guideline. I believe that we can do a guideline in 3D. I haven't done this much, but let's see. This is, let's create guideline segment. Let's see, can I, actually, let me just, if I wanted to say create a guideline segment here, it's interesting. I've got this funny symbol of the eyedropper, although of course I don't see this. No, that's not doing it. See if we do a this. I grab this. No, that's. Okay, so there's a question. I know that there's a way to create guidelines that would snap to elements here. Now, if I put this back into the normal selection mode, maybe that'll, no. All right, so I haven't done this much to remember, but basically what we should be able to do is select part of the morph and extend it along a line, in this case the 5-degree line. Obviously you saw I could make it shorter, but we'd want to be able to, at least in theory, make it longer. So that is something you could, you know, play around with and figure out the way to do that. Let me put it back into showing everything in 3D. Now, if we did want to make this clean up, if we were to put this back here and take this element and potentially, you know, and just my copy of the file, I'm just going to say turn it into a morph. So I'll go to the design, convert selection to morph. All right. You want to do this selectively because then it's, other than just undoing immediately, you can't turn it back into the other thing. But we could potentially, I'm just going to demonstrate something very crude. If I go to that sub selection, well, actually, I'll select the two morphs here, and I'll go to the design, modify morph union. What that's going to do is it's going to make these two into one morph. And now if I select one of them, you can see it selects both of them. Now I'm going to do the sub selection. Let's see, we'll just go to the arrow tool, sub selection here. And now if I select this point, I'm just going to drag this point on top of it and drag this on top of here. And you know, there's some other points that I may need to adjust. But basically, this is at least a possibility that you could experiment with. Now, you might want to do it off to the side. You might want to make a copy of it, just sort of practice it until you can do it in the right context. But essentially, you could turn these into a combined shape that you manually are cleaning up.
Eric, would it not be easier, though, to make them all beams, and then they would clean up automatically?
Two beams will not clean up at the corner automatically.
Even if I use CEO, I don't know how I would make the rake flashing out of a beam.
No, but the beam, you can if you go into the beam tool, because it's now a beam, you can rotate the beam tool in two different directions. So you can certainly slope a beam.
All right.
Sure.
So I'll just do a beam just to show you, even with just the simplest rectangular shape. So if I take a beam here and let's go to our arrow tool, put it back to normal mode. And let me just make it shorter so that we're, when we're doing it, I'll just make two beams here. Come on now, I want to be back in the beam tool here. Now, these two beams, if we look in 3D, they are cleaning up, just like walls do. Now, if I do rotate this up, so if I say that it's going to be a angled beam, I guess we have to choose. Where do you choose the?
Go into the dialog box.
You have to go into the dialog box, yeah, to be able to change it here. All right, so we'll put it at the 5-degree angle that you had. And now we'll put this one, I'll just drag the top of it up to whatever that happens to be. I missed it. Whoops. That's interesting. Okay, so right now it's done by the center point here. So if I take this,
select both and intersect.
Okay, so if I take the two, whoops. If I take the two things and we say use the intersect, now you can see that it's not, it's doing a mitered joint, and in fact this corner is working okay. But of course, when you tilt this, it's going to have a different dimension, and there are some other issues with this. I don't. So what my experience with beams, going straight to an angle, are that they will not necessarily clean up So using morphs is one option. The other thing you could think about, and this is here is a really interesting technique to experiment with, is you can use the railing tool, the new ARCHICAD 21 and later railing tool. And the railing tool can have a profile. And the railing tool doesn't have to be part of a stair. It can simply just have a number of points. And the railing tool, each node point can be moved to whatever height you want. I mean, just think about a normal railing that's going up a staircase and then turning onto a landing. And you can, so I've seen some interesting geometry that it'll actually clean up quite nicely. So you may want to at least experiment with creating a simple railing.
If you would just go to section G, just so that I can show you what the profile is that beam, that rail would want to be. Oh no, maybe it isn't G. Yeah, there it is. So just go to the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see those two shapes basically. Those are the shapes that I'm trying to create, and that's my rake flashing. I've just put a 2x10 underneath it for what didn't show up, Right. But anyway, so that's what can I make that into a railing and go up my eave,
Yeah. You can make a railing profile.
Okay.
So maybe
Cool.
just for fun, let's see if I can do something with the railing tool. So we are in 21, so we can do that. We have the railing tool here. Now let's just go back to the floor plan here, and I'm just going to go with the railing tool active. It's set up to associate to a stair or a slab, but I can draw, if I just click an empty space, it'll allow me to draw these things. Now this is if I select it, you can see it's static because these points were not attached to an element. Now, what is the shape of the railing? We have different options here. Right now it's going to be a ballast rod, but I can say the ballasters will just remove them, and we're going to have just this rail. And for our purposes, the difference between a handrail and a top rail won't make a difference. Although, let's see, here's a profile, or what is it made of? Wood here. Now here's the profile, rectangle or round. But if we switch this from the built-in rail, okay. So right now I've got loaded. What do you call it? Your project as a PLA. So I'm not even using the full library. But basically, what you can do is you'd have a choice of one that would be a profiled rail. And then you'd be able to choose from profiles. And if we just go to the profile, I don't know if you have any profiles defined in this project, but if we go to the options, complex profiles, profile manager, and we look here, well, here's the beam that you actually did have in here. We say edit this profile. Okay, so this is actually, you were doing it for another style where you, but you notice where we have got these choices here. We could say create something as a railing. So let's actually create a new one. Say new, and we'll just call it flashing test here. And if we go to that, so we're in the profile manager, but let's go to that section and see if we can zoom in on this. So this is the shape that we want, right? So you did it with, in this case, it's like thick lines. I'll just do that shape there. I'm going to copy this.
Grouped. If you get out of the ungroup, it'll just group. So, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So there we've got it. Them all grouped. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to edit the profile, and I'm going to paste in into the center of the current view here. All right.
Exactly.
Now,
does it matter how thick the lines are when I make a profile, like that's going to be a piece of steel?
A profile will not be usable unless it has a fill that has some thickness. So lines will not create a profile, although I can use it as a starting point. Now I'm going to go to the on-screen view options and say turn off true line weight. So we're looking at this. We're going to go and drag this point up to here. Now, this is the point that we're going to be drawing along, so it's possible. I'm just maybe going to make a guess that this might be a more useful reference point along this face here. But regardless, whatever is that origin point is where you're going to be drawing. Now, this is just a series of lines. What I'm going to do is I'll use the fill tool and magic wand these lines. And you can see, well, it didn't really give me what I wanted. I need to take it down to these points. In fact, actually, let's, I need to have a uniform thickness. So what I need is to offset. So let me just get rid of that. We'll go and select all these lines. And here's an interesting little trick. I'm going to go and unify them. When I unify them, it's not letting me unify in this view. Okay, that's all right. I'm just going to copy and paste them. So I've now got two sets of those lines. Undo and redo. Now what that did is it now has, if I just drag this away, we now have two copies, and this one is selected here. And now I'm going to go here and use the option to offset. So how thick would this be?
Probably eighth of an inch, a 16th of an inch, so fairly small.
All right. So say eighth here. All right. Mm-hmm. And now if I drop this and close that and do the same over here. All right. So now I have a contained shape, and I'm going to go to the fill tool, set it up for what is it going to be made of. Now it's going to be some type of a metal, right? But I don't see anything in here, so I'll just do let's do something that okay, sort of arbitrary what it is, but I'll just do this tighter one just because I don't know what it is, and I'm going to magic wand this. Now when I magic wand it with the space bar, it's now created a fill. And this is a flashing test. I'm going to store the profile after saying that I want to be able to use it for beams and railings, and well, probably don't need to use walls. I'll just say store it, flashing test. So here now it's defined. So now if I go back to the floor plan and we go to the railing here, now yeah, we don't have the option in terms of the because we're using the limited library to be able to choose that. Maybe let's just check the top rail.
Can't you just add in the 21 library, Eric?
All right, well, I'll tell you what, let's add the library. Go to the library manager and say, in addition to the PLA, we're going to just add in the standard ARCHICAD 21 library. So this is ARCHICAD 21. Library, choose, okay. So that'll give us access to that. We'll probably get some duplicate parts and things, but we can ignore them. So Dan Wyckoff says a little GDL and a profile works wonders. GDL can be great, but we don't need it for this purpose. Okay, these are things we were already missing. Let's just see, now I've got the railing. If we go in here and we go to, yes, there we go. So now we have the full one. So here's the profiled rail, right? So when we do profile rail, then we can choose one of the ones that's defined as available for railings. Notice that the shape, the visual shape has changed here. Let's get rid of the balusters. So now it's just going to be this railing here, the handrail. And we're going to say, no, it shouldn't have any attachments. These are, you can see little things for banister. So we can say no fixing there. So now here's what we've got. So let's say OK. Now let's take a look in 3D at just what we've got there. Oh, and we need to get rid of the posts. I didn't pay attention to that. So this is post or let's see, segment, inner posts. We don't have a minus there. Node. Actually, if I go to the railing as a whole, how do we get rid of the posts? Right now, I'm drawing a blank. Let me go and say I edit it, and then I'll select these 3 posts and say that I want them to be, instead of built-in posts, to be invisible. So they basically will disappear. So now the lines are just sort of selection things, but they won't actually show up when I exit edit mode. They disappear. So now we've got this shape. Obviously, it's cleaning up. Now it should go the other way because it's facing the wrong way. So we'll go and I'll go to the floor plan and I'll just reverse this line. I'll just take this point here and pull it down there. And we'll go to 3D. And now we've got this. Now, if I go here to edit this, and I go to nodes, and we select this, we should be able to change the height of it. In fact, actually, let's just take the whole railing settings and say that it's the segment has a 0 height, because we really don't need to have that. So now, if we select the node, and I'm just going to drag this up. Now you see what it's done here is it raised that up, and we'll take this one and raise it up to the same height. So now, well, it's not cleaning up, unfortunately. It was a noble effort. We are getting the rake. We are getting horizontal. It's probably better than what you did and more easier to manipulate, but it is not automatically cleaning up this corner. So not going to handle it as gracefully as we might like, but it definitely is going to be easier than what you were doing. Once you've defined this shape, you can literally just and right now I'm not even sure if I go to the railing settings. This is segment here. If we go to the let's see, the handrail, this thing, let's see, exit edit mode.
Would it make any difference if you actually took that profile and started from scratch and made the handrail to the angle? It wouldn't clean up any better, would it? Having no,
I don't think so. But here's the other thing. I just want to say that the height should be locked into the line. So now you can see what's happened is I no longer have that distance there. I've set it up so that whatever I'm drawing is right at the 0 mark. Or I mean, I put in 0 in it, and it took it up a little bit. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it has to do with the fact that profile was set. Remember, I had that slightly higher. I was putting it there. But now you can see that the points that I'm actually able to see in the blue are the edge. So
that was the original point you put in.
Yeah. So basically, what we can do is once you've got this set up, you can just define that you're going to put in a railing, and you can just put it along, points in space, and it will do its best job of when you edit this. If we say, allow me to see the segments, and let's see, actually, I guess if we say turn off the railing, now I can go here and I can literally just go and modify these points, and then when I turn that back on, we're going to see what that's doing. So I'm obviously stumbling around here, but it's something you should at least explore, because it will be a very quick way to just get the basic shapes. And yeah, the corner is still not cleaning up. That's why the morph option at least is one possible thing. But if you think about it, this is a pretty complex relationship. You know, you're not going to have, you know, in fact, you may have to just actually create a cover or something that would trim this off, because the distance when things are on an angle is different than when they're horizontal. So it was a noble experiment. I think you can take it a little further, Dean.
No, I appreciate that path.
Yeah. Let us take a look. So we are well past the 2-hour mark, which was sort of my original target. So is there anything else that we haven't looked at in your project that would be, you know, particularly interesting?
Interesting. No, that's pretty. Those factory flashings that I struggled with were pretty much the most unusual challenge that I had on the project. In general, I'm wondering how people do ghost plans, like to show my floor plan on my foundation plan or on my roof framing plan. I explode my floor plan into lines and make them dash. Thank you, Richard.
No, have you got the KillCare one open at all? I'll show you quickly, just in one instance, how to do that.
You know, I have Nunda. All right, so let's just, if I switch over to Nunda, because that's using the same version of ARCHICAD, and we say kill. So yeah, I think it's, so your kill, what is that?
Yeah, that's the one. That'll be the, well. KillCare.
Okay, so we're going to open that. So you're, Rich, we're going to open this, and then you're going to say how you
just go to the site plan, for instance, on the layout site plan.
Mm-hmm. By the way, comments as long as we're going in here. So Ken Brooks says, it will not clean up in actuality. Say the mechanic in the field will not be able to. Let me, for some reason it's just, okay, so here we are, go here. He's pointing out that it's going to be hard. A sheet metal guy won't be able to join those two elements in a manner to clean up, so that is an issue. David Proctor says, in fact, with these types of flashing intersections, the geometry, the forms cannot clean up. So ARCHICAD can't clean it up in part because the geometry is going to be a challenge. That's Jim Schlegel says, for metal buildings, we've created a series of corner caps, since that is a way to handle it. Let me just
select the DA01 site and roof plan. And if you just selected, just do a big selection over all of that.
So big selection over everything, yeah.
Yeah, just sort of pretend you're trying to select everything on the sheet. You'll notice how many on the actual site plan itself. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different frames, and those are taken all from the separate stories. So what I've done is created a special layer, sometimes just one, but sometimes it's more than one, to show only those things that I want to see on a lower floor, for instance. So this is the main big one is the roof plan of the main building. But then there's basically the ground floor with the garage. Then there's the what I call the studio level, which has then up, the next one up is that where you can sort of see the planter box that shows through. And then there's the retreat up on the left hand, down at the left hand corner. So all of those are laid in there and then organized. What do you call it? You know, you can decide which one is bring into the front and send to the back. But that means that I can have, that's a complete BIM model. So there's nothing that I have to turn into 2D lines. I just show And once that's set up, of course, then you can change the model and do as you like. In most cases, never adjust those again. Do you understand what I'm doing with that, Dean?
So if I've got my foundation plan on my layout sheet, you're suggesting I could add the floor plan as another drawing to the layout sheet?
That's correct. And you overlay, so you decide what you want to see and what you don't want to see, below.
So here's a view that is shown now in the context of the layout. If I go back to the let's go trace and reference, we can use this palette here. If I switch back to the layout with this view, so this is one drawing. So if we go to and I say select all, I can see all the different drawings. If I go to this is a drawing here, say open this one with the layout as a reference. So this is, and then I turn off the reference just for clarity. So this is what we're seeing on that particular story. When we look at it in the context of the layout, it's being placed, on the layout with certain information. Now, when I
look at F section, maybe it would you can sort of see how this building is constructed. It's on a very steep slope, so therefore I need to have all these different layers or just go to a section in the
actually, let's just take a 3D view, because the 3D view that's one of the things I'd been planning to show is this is obviously a very challenging context where you've got so many different levels. So that top-down view of the site plan sort of makes it look sort of flat, so that you can see the relationship of things, but really each one of these views comes from a different story level.
And like I said, I did what you're doing, Dean, is change some into 2D lines, but of course if something changes in the model, then you've got to redo all of that. Well, this way you can... Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an interesting, I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah, so for split levels, you can do it even for the same story. Like, let's say it's the second floor has a split level. You can have potentially more than one view that make the second floor, even, depending upon how different in height they are. Otherwise, windows and doors may show up in strange ways. But here we have a great example of a synthesized view, which follows symbolic conventions for what you would want to see on the site plan, but it definitely is not story based. It's
just quickly, Eric, I have another project which has 5 different levels of this is 26 units on a sloping site with 26 units, and that's a very interesting way of how I stack that. I won't get into it now, but we might want to discuss that at some stage. It was a big challenge trying to show floor plans and everything together on the ground, and I've managed to come up with a system that makes that very easy and very clear.
Okay. Well, perhaps we can revisit or take a look at that in another session. So, Dean, anything else that would be good to look at in your project?
I can't think of anything. Because I transitioned from ARCHICAD 11 to 21 with this project, I have windows that are still in 11 and windows that are in 21, and then a couple of windows that and then another window. But the window markers, how they work in AC 11 and 21 is radically different, and so I sort of struggle with that. I find that the 21 window markers are harder to adjust on my plan view.
All right, well, let's see if we can just adjust markers there. There are a couple of questions people typed in saying, how did you see it all in 3D? So I'm not quite sure, Rachel, what your confusion is. Generally, when you take a 3D view, you have certain layers turned on using a layer combination, and unless you restrict the 3D view arbitrarily to say, I only want to see the 3rd and 4th floor, or you do a cutaway where you say, I want to remove things below or above certain heights, normally you would see the entire model in 3D as long as it's all, the layers are showing. Now, what was the trick on the site plan was that we were showing multiple different story views carefully, sort of like you're cutting out pieces of paper and you're laying them essentially on top of each other, although more sophisticated because you can have things see through each other. You can actually overlay. It's not like opaque pieces of paper necessarily. Alexis says, can we use trace and reference to create ghost plans? No, because trace and reference essentially is an on-screen device. Now you can print, if you go to print or plot from a layout, you can say whether you want to include the reference, but primarily the reference is something for on-screen guidance for you to be able to see that things are lining up properly. It is not intended for an output. Now, what Rich did in terms of that site plan is a way of doing a variety of things. You can do ghost plans where you say, I've got maybe the ceiling plan, and then I also have some floor plan information that is ghosted in a faint line work. What you can do is you can basically put, I'm just going to say the floor plan information with a different pen. So it's a wholly different, maybe it's the furniture, or maybe it's, some other site information that you place that drawing onto the sheet, but make the pen a light color. All right, so let's see then. Let's go to that window marker and see if maybe that's something else that I can give you a tip on. I'm not sure. So where would we see the window markers? That
floor plan.
All right, so if we go
top,
to
at the very top.
Yeah, floor plan here. Okay, and so if we
actually, if you zoom in, like I think either I don't know which ones honestly, whether it's actually W16 or which one. If you just click on the marker, and so in order to get things to fit, I drag the label and the numbers and try to squeeze them into my roof overhang or whatever's going on there, and with the 21 windows, I find it squirrely.
Okay, so in terms of the markers, obviously, so if I'm going to deselect it. If I select the window, it's selecting the window and the marker. The marker is integrated into the window, and of course, in the window settings, we have marker settings, and there's
this is an 11. Yeah.
Okay, this is
That's
11.
fine. I mean, so what I usually do is I just put my cursor in the middle of the window number, and I can drag it, in two directions, and just kind of place it, exactly where I want it. But in 21, I can't do that, and we can find another window in this project that has a
okay.
AC21 window.
When I moved it, you can see that this handle is, or maybe it's this one here. We're moving some things, but they're sort of separated. Yeah, so it's a little buggy. Now this is, of course, your window, your 11 window here in 21. It certainly has some issues. Let's take a look. If I were to go to change it from the dimension marker here, from the window marker 11 to the window marker 21 here. Okay, so obviously it looks very similar. We'll just say okay. Now it does have some issues. You've got the background fill of this is using a fill, you've got an old project and the fills have come across in a funny way. We'll just go and say the background, let's see.
Go above on the next box up, dimension marker.
Yeah, marker 2D representation, and we have the, okay, here's the background marker fill, and I'll just make this an empty fill here. So, all right, so that was a misalignment between the library the 21 library and this project's environment in terms of what fills are defined as. But now if I go to this one here and we say I want to move it, all right, so we can move this around here. Now the line work, I'm not sure what we want to do here, but we can move that. And the numbers, okay, so we can see that there are two hotspots and I can move them around. So this seems to be working pretty well in terms of just being able to.
It does actually. Yeah, that seems to be working fine. It's actually, yeah, I'll look at which window label setting I've got. It's my AC21 windows, which I have a problem with, but I'll experiment with some of those. Is there without even looking at my windows, is there a best practice for window marker settings that I should think about? That's really my question, I guess.
Well, there are a variety of different styles, and certainly there's no best practice in terms of, do you want it to be a circle versus another shape? Do you want it to have a line through it or not? Do you want to have this, this information, the size on the plan or not? I mean, people prefer different things. What probably the one best practice I would say is once you get a style that sort of puts it nominally a good distance away, nominally the right size, the right font, etc., you'd want to save it as a favorite. Now, unfortunately, favorites, while you can save, let's say, set a favorite for a window or a chair or a wall, but we can't set a favorite for the dimension marker separate from the window. So what that means is that you would set up the settings in, let's say, in your favorites tool for, let's just say 3 different window types: a casement window, an awning window, a slider, etc. And each one of them you carefully make sure that the the marker is set with the same settings. And then when you use those favorites, you're going to always be getting back to the settings. So in general, you want to standardize on those settings, but I wouldn't say there's a particular, like, oh, you should always have it 2 feet away from here, or you should always have this be a certain size circle. That's really arbitrary.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Rich, do you have any comments on that?
I guess I do have a pretty standard symbol for walls and different one for doors, and once I've got one set, I just select all of the windows if it's necessary, because I haven't got it on a favorite, and select all the windows and just go through and actually physically set it in one dialog box so they all become the same. That's generally how I've handled it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, one thing, clearly you can select multiple windows, and even though one is a casement, one's a slider, and some are small and some are big, you can select multiple windows and change their marker settings, and only the marker will update. In general, I'm pretty sure you know that you can change part of the settings of multiple elements without affecting some other ones. So, but in general, in general, presetting stuff so that it's, when you first place it, it's got the best chance of being the way you want it would be the best practice, so that you then only occasionally have to move it out of the way.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, Dean, I'm glad we were able to at least get you connected with audio with the phone. I have no idea what went wrong with the other, with the other 2 guys. We'll have to check on it. And hooray, Richard, you went first, so we actually had 45 minutes of conversation before we started having that frustration. And thanks for showing, having that second file ready to go, in terms of being able to show that interesting site, how you dealt with it in terms of the site plan. That's a great example of how you can combine live views of the 3D model with 2D layout, for a specific graphic purpose, and yet they're all still linked. So let's see if there's any other Final comment. So Joel says, to see everything in 3D, use both the layers and the renovation tool settings. Okay, that's a good point. Joel makes related to that question from Rachel. Renovation tool will allow you to say, hey, I want to see the existing building, or I want to see the new version, where I've demoed certain things and new things are added. Tom says, thank you. Okay, I know, Tom, you had a question earlier that I don't know whether we got to. And you may have already gone, but where was that question? How to make better BIMX models. So, all right, well, that's an interesting question. Obviously, clean models, in other words, modeling things in detail are probably the primary thing, just sort of making the model really represent the building. And the secondary thing would be nowadays that you can put in data into the elements to the extent that you can load the element with data. Then in BIMX, you can select the element and see that data. Whereas if it's just 2D, a label that points at something and says a note, and it's not actually attached to the element, that's not going to be as accessible in the BIMX. Rich, do you use BIMX much?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to get my builders and developers to use it on site, because it's so compact, no printing costs, full 3D, all the rest of it. So no, to me it's a very useful tool for actually construction, but also of course for presentation to clients. I do use it all the time.
All right.
And I use it also for it's a great checking tool. As you're going, I do a draft BIMX and then walk through the project and see walls that aren't cleaned up properly or jutting through up into another floor, or the fridges happen to be 3 feet off the floor because I haven't set it the right correction, the right height to begin with. So a lot of things like that. It's very good for a quick whole model check.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you, Dean, and thank all of you who stuck through this. I know we lost some people both because we've gone on 2 3/4 hours, as well as probably some people bailed out when we had the audio issues. So I'm going to take this as an experiment that had some value, and next time make sure that anyone who I choose to be a panelist, that we actually have a tech session to make sure that the audio works. But overall, I look forward to getting feedback from all of you just about the value of doing this type of project checkup. I think it's interesting to see different styles of work, different organizational structures, different size projects, and seeing a project in the African savannah is very different than seeing a hillside project in Australia, or there's one Chilean architect who sent me a file but then had a conflict and wasn't able to be on, and he had a sort of, I guess, an urban building with like 5 stories and lots of offices, commercial building, which maybe we'll get a chance to look at another time. So thank you, Rich. Thank you, Dean.
Sure.
Aloha. Thank you, guys.
And look forward to working with 22. I'm going to be creating some new materials for 22, including new version of master template, some training materials. I know Graphisoft is creating some really useful ones, but there's always some things that I feel are useful to explore deeper. And I am planning to do a course on quantities and costing, perhaps starting in September or October, because now with ARCHICAD 22, we have the ability to do calculations in a much more integrated fashion, and that'll make it just much more practical to get some of the quantity takeoffs that I think would be particularly useful. If any of you know, or if any of you who are on this do quantity takeoffs, in other words, if you actually do your own quantity survey and costing, I'd be interested in working with ARCHICAD users who do that to help figure out how certain things will work. In other words, how to apply the tools to the real projects. Or if you know someone who's an expert on that area, I'm definitely interested in working cooperatively with people who have expertise in that subject area, because I think there's a lot for all of us to learn, and I certainly don't think that I can do it all without input. So look forward to sharing that. That'll be an interesting journey in the fall. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, that'll be the fall. So, all right. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Dean. And all right, take care.